Well, good morning, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be back for you again this morning. Um, I was going to go ahead and warn you, I guess. Here at my home congregation at Hilton, they're always asking me if I'm going to stomp on their toes if they need to wear steel-toed boots to church. And well, they kept asking over and over, so I figured I'd deliver. And so after my lesson, this one that I give at Hilton, Brother Glenn Brown asked me if I'd rub his toes for him because I guess I stomped on them so much. Anyway, so that's what you have to look forward to, I guess. I hope that what I have to say will help you. The lesson that I decided to make with this, I realized that a bunch of people have this problem. I think everyone has this problem in some way or another. And it's kind of funny, God put scripture in the Bible to talk about these things in kind of humorous ways, and we've got some we'll talk about. And He knew we was going to have this struggle. Anyways, so a lot of the lesson or the scripture I'm going to give is in Proverbs. We'll look at a few others. But I got to thinking, as I was getting ready to make this lesson, what causes us in life to not call the people that we need to call when we need to call them, to not write the letters that we need to write. And I guess today's world, we don't really like write letters, so text people. But why do we not send the messages that we need to send, or clean the car, clean the house, whatever it may be? Why don't we do the things that we need to do? Write the lessons, do the meetings. What causes us to not do what we need to do? Well, that word is procrastination. And that is the act of delaying or putting off tasks until the last minute, even though you know it will cause stress or even bad results. So I will confess to you, it's what I did with this lesson. I knew from the first of the month, or the last of the month in June, that at the end of July, I was going to have the last Sunday on the second service at Hilton to give this lesson. And it wasn't till the last Sunday, that Friday before, 2 days before, that I started making this lesson. I had a whole month to do it, and I didn't do it until the last minute. And I went to Sunday church, and I got out, and it was Monday, and I was thinking I needed to get it done, and I just kept waiting, and all of a sudden Thursday's around, and I texted Sean, and I was like, I really need to get on this. And we started talking about a story that we had both heard, and I decided to go with this story. And that story is this. It's the farmhand. It's the one that can sleep through a storm. There's two versions of this story. One of them is I can sleep when the wind blows, and one is I can sleep through a storm, and that's the one I'm going to talk about. Well, there was this old couple that had a farmhouse, and they had a lot of work to be done. I guess they were getting older and couldn't take care of it. And so the farmer, he said, I'm going to hire somebody to help me take care of this place and get things done in time to, where we can function a little bit better. Well, they decided to hire somebody, and this young man comes out. He says, well, I want the job. And the old farmer puts him in the house, and he says, well, what can you do for me? And the young boy says, I can sleep through a storm. And I don't know, you don't really have to own a farm to know. If somebody tells you that, I probably wouldn't hire them. That's not a very good thing. I don't want you sleeping in a storm when you need to be doing your work. But I guess the way the little kid's eyes looked, the young man's eyes, the farmer liked him, so he went against his better judgment. He said, I'm going to hire you anyway. And so he hired him, started him out. Well, 2 weeks later, there was this storm that came through. And the wife abruptly woke the husband up, shook him up, and said, there's a storm outside. We need to take care of all the animals and everything outside. Well, he jumps up and throws his clothes on. He hollers up the kid's name upstairs. And the only thing he gets back as answer is a bunch of snoring. So he runs upstairs and beats on the door. The kid, he don't wake up. So all of a sudden, this thunder hits and rattles the walls in the house. And it kind of distracts the old farmer. And he says, well, I'll worry about the kid later. I'm going to go take care of everything outside. He runs outside and he runs to the barn. And as he's going in the barn, he sees the silos over here. And all the grain and everything was in the silos, and the silos were shut and put away. And it was all dry and safe. And he runs in the barn and he looks in the wall and he sees all the hay is stacked in the wall, strapped with tarps on it. And there's no way rain can blow in on it. It's secured to the wall. He sees all the animals in their stalls are laid down. The cows are chewing their cud and everything is just fine and dandy. He's happy. And the cows is not even stressing. Nothing's out of place. Everything's right where it needs to be. And he runs back to the house. He sees the shutters are shut on the windows of the house, and that there was a nice stack of firewood cut and split and stacked right there under the porch, dry as a bone, ready for the fireplace inside. Well, he goes inside and he shuts the door, and he remembers 2 weeks prior of hiring this young man, and he says, I can sleep through a storm, and he understands now what that means. It means that that kid did everything he needed to do prior to the storm that needed to be done. So everything was in its place when the storm hit. Now that kid can actually sleep in the storm because everything was done. That's a story of procrastination, because that farmer was the procrastinator. He waited till the storm hit to get everything done. Now he's outside soaking wet, getting hit with hail and all kinds of stuff, trying to get things done when the kid's sleeping sound upstairs. So that is a very good story. And so that's kind of why I decided to go with this lesson, because I was procrastinating with it. So, procrastination causes unnecessary pain for us that you're going to have to do it anyway, and putting it off makes it worse. So just because you keep putting it off don't mean you're not going to have to do it. It just, when you do it, it's going to be worse than if you'd have done it now. So I'll give this example. If you do the dishes after you eat, if you just set them on the sink, the next day you do them, you got to scrub hard and everything's hard on there and it don't come off. Whether if you'd just done it after you ate it, it'd come off nice and clean. That's just a little example of putting things off. You're going to do it anyway. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. And so I have some things here. I have 10 things that we can look at that we can do in our lives to maybe better ourselves from being a procrastinator. So what are the things that we can do from not putting things off? Well, the first thing I'm going to say going into these 10 things is you have to have a change of perspective, how you look at things. Hopefully these 10 things that I have to say will kind of help us see a little bit better way to look at our life and how to do things. And if I haven't got it to you yet, it's not just about cleaning dishes. It's about spiritual life. It's about your walk with God. And procrastinating can lead to spiritual death if you're not careful. So the number one thing I have is the hard way is the easy way. I know that don't really make sense right now, but have you ever heard the saying, doing what's right is not always easy, and doing what's easy is not always right? And that is so true. There's in Proverbs chapter 15, verse 19, it says, the way of the lazy man is like a hedge of thorns, but the way of the upright is like a highway. So that's the first example to see that lazy ways are terrible. So doing what's right is not always easy. Doing what's easy is not always right. I'm going to give a little example. I don't know if this scripture is for me particular, but my life flows right in well with this. There's a trail in my pasture that I ride when I check cows, and it goes around this forest and under a bridge on the road. And this trail is probably 2 minutes to get to that bridge, but there's so many times I'm thinking, I'm just going to cut through these trees here and make a shortcut to get to this bridge and save, a minute and 30 seconds to get here. Well, the time I get in there, I remember this verse, the way of the lazy man is like a hedge of thorns, because it's covered in briars. I've got ticks all in my hair. The briars have scraped my face, and now my four-wheeler's stuck in between two trees. And it took me 30 minutes to get through that forest, and that would have taken me 2 to go around the long way. So the few extra steps that I would have taken to go around the forest looked hard, but that wound up being the easy way, because the lazy man goes into the briars and gets stuck. So the next thing I'll have, number 2, is if you wait for the perfect moment, you'll never do it. In Ecclesiastes 11, verse 4, it says, he who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. So waiting for the perfect conditions will mean inactivity. This practical insight is especially applicable to our spiritual lives. If we wait for the perfect time or place for personal Bible reading, we will never begin. We need to take steps now to grow spiritually. Don't wait for conditions that may never exist. This verse in Ecclesiastes is talking about the man that walks out of his house and looks up the sky and sees the wind blowing and says, well, I'm not going to plant seeds today because the wind is going to blow them away. That man that never plants those seeds is never going to grow a crop. The one that goes outside and says, well, it's raining, I can't harvest my crop. He will never reap what he has grown. There's nothing going to come out of that good. That's what this is talking about. And so I think in our lives, we tend to push things off to tomorrow that we can do today. Well, I'm too tired. The house is not clean. I'll do it tomorrow. And tomorrow becomes next week. And next week becomes never. The chances that never exist. And I'm going to tie it into quicksand being procrastination. Procrastination is like quicksand. The more you do it, you start sinking in life. And I'll tie that in with Peter. When he was walking on the water, he took his eyes off Jesus and started sinking in the water. Because of doubt and fear, he started to sink. And that's what procrastination does to us. And that's what causes procrastination. We fear if we go do this, somebody might not like us. Or I'm scared if I do this that it won't turn out good. So I just don't want to do it at all. Well, you're going to have to face it anyway. You might as well do it now. I'm going to go ahead and give you this example. I didn't Hilton because they got tired of hearing it. But I think I've given it once so far. You can hear it again. My sister come home when I was younger and told me a story that stuck with me forever. And it's about the cows and the buffaloes. And I know I got a lot about cows, but anyways. So there was this storm coming, and these cows got scared, and they run away from this storm. Well, the buffalo, and this is fact, this is truth, the buffalo runs through the storm. So as the buffalo runs through it, he uses his energy to fight the storm. When it gets over, the storm blows over, the buffalo gets to eat the grass and drink the water and see the pretty rainbow that the storm has left behind, while the cows are still running. And one of these days, probably pretty soon, probably a few minutes, the storm's going to catch them cows. And they're going to have to fight the storm anyway. Now they don't have any energy to fight it because they've used it running away. They got to go through it anyway. And now they may not even make it through because all their energy's out. They can just lay down and give up. So when you face something that you need to do, run to it and go through it, because when you can use your energy to fight it, you can rest afterwards. The third point we will look at is procrastination is dumb. It's just plain and simple. It's dumb. And this is kind of a few of the proverbs that God gives us and tells us how kind of funny that a lazy man is in kind of humorous ways. In Proverbs 26, verse 14, it says, "As a door turns on its hinges, so does the lazy man in his bed." And in Proverbs 26, verse 15, and in chapter 19, verse 24, it talks about the lazy man burying his hands in a bowl and wearies him to bring it back to his mouth. You know how dumb that does sound? You just sitting there eating and you put your hand in a cookie jar and can't even bring it back to your mouth. And you turn in your bed like a door on its hinges. That's what he's talking about, lazy man. And this describes us when we are procrastinating. We're being lazy. It's dumb. And we're just like the silly old sluggard. You know, and I think everyone, if you don't, it's probably a good thing, but I think everyone has that friend that has this get-rich-quick scheme. They've got these other friends, they say, you know, you're working too hard. You don't know what you're doing. I'm going to go over here and not work hardly at all, and I'm going to get rich quick. And it might be on the verge of being illegal, but he's going to do it anyway. And he says that you need to do it too. Well, those things tend to hardly ever work out. And I used to be that one. I was, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get rich quick and whatever. And anyway, I wound up working way harder than I needed to on that. And then Proverbs 26, verse 16, it says, "The lazy man is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly." You know, this guy says that, you suckers, you're working too hard. I'm going to take a shortcut. You remember the first verse we talked about the briars? Well, this is just like us. He says, the lazy man is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men can answer sensibly, saying that he's smarter than those that work hard that get their money, and he's going to wind up being in the briars. So this is not just about the friend bouncing from scheme to scheme. It's us too. When we procrastinate, we think we're finding a shortcut when we're really just being dumb. And so talking about those friends like that leads us to our fourth point, and that is seek good examples. In Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20, it says, "He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed." You know the saying, a rotten apple spoils the barrel. It often applies to friendships, and with good reason, because our friends and associates affect us, sometimes profoundly for good or bad. So we need to be careful to whom you choose as your closest friends and spend time with people who bring out the best in you, because you and your friends will likely grow to resemble each other. And that also leads to the you are who you hang around, because that's the truth. Well, that brings us to our fifth point, and that is diligence is an act of love. In Mark chapter 12, verses 30 and 31, it says, "And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these." And you might be wondering why I'm giving these two scriptures in procrastination, and that's this. Jesus is here giving the first two greatest commandments. The second one is like the first one, love your God with all your heart. And it says, love your neighbor as yourself. So if you don't mow your yard, the grass grows up and the mosquitoes come and the flies and insects come, that affects your neighbor. If you don't take out the trash in your backyard, it starts to stink and affects your neighbor because you didn't want to do what you needed to do. So it don't just affect you, it affects him. And this isn't about trash and mosquitoes, it's about spiritual life. If I don't take the time out to read the Bible, study it, and learn it for myself, I won't be able to answer the questions for somebody later on down the road that needs my help. If I don't do what I need to do for myself now to better myself, I can't help you later on. So that starts with trash, and it continually leads on with spiritual death because we don't do what we need to do. In procrastination, we are selfish, harming others by not doing our work, whether it's intentional or unintentional. So Proverbs 18 verse 9 says, "He who is slothful in his work is a brother to him who is a great destroyer." So even if you're not destroying it, if you don't build it up, you're the brother to him. Because we need to be working to make better things. So if you just sit back and don't do anything at all, you're the brother to this destroyer. You know, if you ever seen a house somebody moves out of, it starts to tear itself down because there's no life in it. If you're living in it, things continue to look good, but as soon as they move out and leave it, the house falls apart and it's unlivable. And that's what our body does and our life does, because God is life. When God's not in our life, our body, our soul starts to deteriorate like the old house and nobody's living in. So that leads us to the number 6 point, and that's stop making ridiculous excuses. In Proverbs chapter 22, verse 13, it says, "The lazy man says, 'There is a lion outside. I shall be slain in the streets.'" This proverb refers to an excuse a lazy person might use to avoid going to work. The excuse sounds silly to us, but that's often how our excuses sound to others. So we don't need to rationalize laziness and take your responsibility seriously, and get to work. That's another reason of how dumb procrastination is. Saying, "There's a lion in the streets, I'm going to get slain, so I'm not going to go to work." You know how many times we make our own lines up? That's either dishes or trash or whatever. It's our own lines, and we don't get things done that we need to get done. And that leads us to our 7th point. That's organize our life. In Proverbs 6, verse 6, it says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways, and be wise." You know, this verse right here is deep, because if you ever gone outside and looked at an ant in an ant bed, they're always moving. Usually they're biting me, but they're always moving on the ground and going about things and going where they need to go. They don't have a boss to tell them what they need to do. They just know they need to do it. They go find maybe it's a corn dog in the park. I know that's a silly excuse, but you can imagine one ant carrying a corn dog back ain't going to work. But he leaves a trail and he goes back and gets the rest of them. He comes back to help them. That shows our lives what we need to do. I don't know that I've ever seen an ant leaned up under a shade weed taking a nap. He's always working. He's always working. He knows that winter is coming, so he works in the summer. That way he's prepared for the winter, just like the storm. That way they can sleep through the winter. You know, we don't have to have somebody to tell us to go do something. We know we need to do it. We need to go do it. It doesn't mean that we can't work, and then when we hit something that we need help with, it's okay to come back and get help for it. But we need to take the steps to do that and get there. Number 8, clarity of purpose and know your why. In John chapter 9, verse 4, it says, "I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day, because the night is coming when no one can work." So we need to work in the daylight because night's coming when no one can work. You know, that reminds me of Romans chapter 7, verse 15. So as for what I am doing, I do not understand. For what I will to do, that I do not practice. But what I hate, that I do. You know, we need to stop taking procrastination so seriously and start taking immediate steps, and small actions that work now. You know, there's also a fine line, though, and I'm going to throw this in here now. There's a time that you need to wait. There's a time that the phrase, "be still and know that I am God," comes into play. There's a time when we don't need to do anything at all. Just sit back and wait. But there's also times that we need to stop waiting and get up and go. So I'll let that be your homework. You can study on that. You can go see when to wait and when to work. But the fact is, when it comes to spiritual life, you always need to work towards it. You always need to get up and take small steps, take immediate action, and go. You know, when I first started to get in the church and remain and be real faithful in it, I was baptized and I would go Sunday mornings. And at Hilton we had second services, but I wouldn't go. And Wednesday nights I wouldn't go neither. I would just go Sunday mornings and leave. And thought I had so much to do. Thought I had so much work to be done. I was working. I was going and doing things. And I was in my grandparents' house. And I went to walk out the door, and my pawpaw, my grandpa, some of you knew him, he said, "Son, I wish you'd start paying attention to your time in church." And he said, "I wish you'd start going more." He said, "I know you got a lot of things to do. I know that you're busy." He says, "But you need to make more time for God." And I said, "Yeah, I know. I will. One of these days I'll get there. One of these days I put it off. One of these days I will." I said, "I'm just so busy." He said, "I know, son." He said, "But you only get to give God 3 hours a week in worship services. There's 24 hours in a day. There's 7 days a week. You do the math and see how many hours that is. 3 of those hours is all I get to give God in a worship service. So that brings us to the front of our lesson and a change in perspective. When you see that we are required to do things, but when you see that you get to do it, it's not a have to. I get to go to church and worship God 3 hours a week. You get to come here on Sunday morning and worship God. That change in perspective is so deep, and it's so beautiful to see. And if you're looking for an excuse, you'll always find it. There's always excuses there. So that leads us to number 9. We got 2 more left. Don't waste what God has given you. In Proverbs chapter 12, verse 27, it says, "The lazy man does not roast what he took in hunting, but diligence is a man's precious possession." Saying this, the hunter that goes out and kills deer, so lazy he doesn't cut it up for meat, he's not going to roast it because he didn't do the work necessary. God blessed him with the deer to eat, and he didn't do the work to get there to where he could do it. So number 10, I'm almost done. Trust over fear. When you look at Jesus on the cross, in Luke chapter 22, verse 42, it says, saying, "Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." You know, Jesus never let fear get in the way of his work on the cross for us. I think he probably wanted to stay, we've talked about this, but I think he probably wanted to stay with his disciples. He loved them so much. Stay with the people and stay with the disciples. I'm sure if there was another way to do this, he would want to do it. I don't know, even Jesus, I don't think would want to hang on a cross and be in pain. But he wanted to save us. And so he didn't let the fear of that get in his way to save us from ourselves and from hell. He did his work. So we need to trust God over fear and say, not my will, but your will be done. And why do we fear anyway the outcome when we can put it in God's hands and he wins every time? I'm going to close with Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. It says, "Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin that is so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." We need to run our race that is set before us as Jesus endured the cross. Do our part and get up and work and go for it. Well, I hope that something that I said could help you. I hope that I was able to deliver it to you in a manner that's pleasing in God's sight and helpful for you. I'm going to leave it with you this morning. If you've not obeyed the gospel, we're going to give you the invitation to do so now. You need to hear the word, believe it, repent, confess, and be baptized. If you've done those things and need the prayers of the church or to come back to him, then stop procrastinating, and that's the time is now. So I'm going to leave it with you. Come while we stand and sing the song of invitation.